Next, we have Natalie Fang, founder of Nochi. Well, at U of M, Natalie decided to pursue a startup that is not only a woman-led gaming studio, but also could challenge the status quo by putting stories and relationships first. Since then, she's been involved in the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Ann Arbor and at the U, including the Desai Accelerator and the Social Venture Fund. Please welcome Natalie to the stage.
Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to talk to you about gaming today. So, in the beginning of the pandemic, we all had to quarantine, right? And it was a challenge for some, but I actually thrived under the pandemic in the beginning because I could finally game. And so, I don't know if many of you remembered, but the Nintendo Switch was a little bit hard to come by. One of the reasons was because of this game, Animal Crossing. So I had a copy, and I played over 100 hours of the game, exploring the virtual world with my online avatar because I couldn't go outside anymore during the pandemic. But it was fun, and it was immersive, and I loved it. So that's just an example of my gaming habits. I also like to play online multiplayer games, competitive fighting games, but one of my favorite genres is anime games. So anime a decade or two ago was a little bit more obscure. But thanks to technology, such as streaming platforms, almost everyone knows what anime is now. During the pandemic, its growth grew a ton too. Netflix cited record numbers in the year 2020. So people know what it is, might not watch it themselves, but everyone knows. Now, going back to gaming, when you wanted to game in the past, you probably had to buy a console, which could cost a few $100s, or you'd have to have a powerful enough PC to play games. But nowadays, almost everyone has a smartphone, so gaming is more accessible than ever. But what people don't realize is that over 60% of mobile gamers are female. So we have these two things. We have anime consumption growing, and then we have female gamers playing on mobile phones. So what are our options as female gamers for mobile anime titles? Here's an example. Not exactly the highest quality when you first look at it, because you're in this dramatic moment playing through a narrative scene, and it's super intense, and there's suddenly a floating chessboard. Or a wine bottle breaks because a fight breaks out. But again, it's clip art studio-like, and it's, again, floating. So it breaks the immersion, right? Now, this third example is my favorite. This is your best friend who's super important to you, but apparently not important enough to have a face. So, sure, great, we have games for female gamers and it's anime, but it's not exactly up to par. So let's look at some AAA titles. These are high production games. There's a few things that they have in common. First, romance anime games, check. Second, these games were produced in Japan, then translated into English. Okay. Third, the producer, the director, and/or the main scriptwriter, so the person who's writing the romance scenes, writing about how the female protagonist is feeling, all of those key people are male. So you have these male leaders leading high production gaming teams, creating games for females. So this leads to a problem. There's a misalignment with female gamers' interests right now. And there's gender dynamics that are very different in the Far East compared to the US culture. And you see this lack of diversity manifest online where people are complaining in Reddit communities and Twitter communities. But yet people are still playing these games. Because you saw earlier, well, otherwise we have floating wine bottles for our games instead. So this is where Nochi comes in. We're creating anime games for women led by a US women team. So we have a problem, right? How do we eventually get to okay, well, let's make a startup about this? I have a sister who graduated from the Rhode Island School of Design. So hardcore designer. And we'll talk and she'll suddenly say, you don't do design thinking, you're in business. But I would actually argue against that. Because I think as entrepreneurs, we naturally embrace principles of design thinking. So let me illustrate this. So for design thinking, you go through this loop, right? You try to empathize with the users, you ideate, you define the problem, you end up prototyping ideas, and you test those ideas and those solutions. And you go through this loop until you come up with an innovative product or an innovative solution that solves a need, or maybe solves a need that people didn't know that they had. So here's the simplified startup process. We have a problem, we identify it, we create a solution. During that process, we're doing customer discovery work, trying to figure out who our market is. Eventually, once we do all that work, we write a business plan, right? Or a pitch deck. And in that deck, you have your go-to-market strategy, your revenue model, and eventually you shop it around. You pitch it to investors, or you share it with mentors and advisors to get their feedback. Well, all of that is a form of design thinking. You have to empathize with the users, so you yourself might be the user, which is why you created the startup. You do the customer discovery, right? And then writing your business plan is a type of prototyping. You don't just right off the bat write a brilliant business plan. It's always an iterative process when you're creating a startup. And same with that testing piece. When you're going out pitching to investors, that is a testing process of design thinking. So as entrepreneurs, we're already organically thinking about design thinking principles. But how do we do that on a product level? Because for gaming in particular, it's a commodity. Sort of like movies, you might have a favorite movie, right? And you'll go back to it from time to time. But you're always consuming other movies. Well, same with gaming. People are constantly consuming games. So we don't just want to create a game that, yeah, it's easy to make a high production game, but we want to be more innovative. So we lean on design thinking. So our team, after doing the market research or building customer profiles, we do a lot of empathy workshopping. So we think about our users. What are they doing? What are they saying? What are they thinking? How are they feeling? And we think widely and broadly, and eventually we bring all that back down to a few focus points. And with these focus points, we start doing our research. Sure, we look at competitors, as any entrepreneur would do. You should understand what your competitors are doing, what features that they have. But if we all stay only in the gaming sphere, especially in romance games, well, you saw the competitors, so that's not quite innovative enough. So that's why that empathy workshop, all that mapping we did with our key focus points was important. Because we realized, similar to how I spent over 100 hours on Animal Crossing exploring a virtual world, these users, female gamers, want to escape reality for a little bit. They want to explore these new relationships with 2D characters in this immersive virtual world. So how do we do that? Well, if it's a romance game, let's start looking at dating apps. So we looked at Tinder, we looked at Bumble. It's about interactions in these games, right? And they're building relationships that are online. Well, let's look at social media. Everyone's using social media. That's how people are used to communicating these days. So let's take aspects from all these things outside of the gaming world to come up with an innovative solution. And so that's what we did. So design thinking is really important for us because not only are we, trying to understand our users by people watching at anime conventions, eventually we get to a prototype, and sure, we have everyone test our prototype. But we go through this loop several times. And one of the key loops for us was actually with Kickstarter. Kickstarter was a test for us. So entrepreneurs, we don't only just do tests through user, UI, UX, and play testing this build, but Kickstarter was a form of testing for us to get that validation. Is this what people wanted? Is this innovative enough? Well, fast forward, we successfully crowdfunded, which is super exciting, and we got our answer. But that wasn't the end of that loop. We are back on the loop again, because now we have a new subset of users brought in from Kickstarter. And so we're going through this innovative process again through design thinking. So least to say, our team is on our way to redefine the romance anime games category. We're going beyond just, the low-quality games and the misalignment issues, but creating an immersive experience where people want to be sucked in for hours and create these online relationships with things that they're used to from other spheres and making a game that's different and not like all the others on the market. So to all the entrepreneurs out there, I implore you to lean into design thinking, to embrace what you're doing naturally already, and put that user first. Think about what they're saying. What are they doing? How are they feeling? When you put the user first, then you'll be able to build an innovative product. If anyone ever wants to talk about gaming, anime, or design thinking, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.